Tonight on 24, Trump says a lot of military forces are like deserting and falling apart.
It's a serious threat to the world, to the Middle East and to the world. And everybody agrees with me. I think virtually every country.
The U.S. president has said Washington will do whatever it takes to bring the war in Iran to an end. 5 European countries and Japan announced readiness for safe reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. They've asked Tehran to cease any efforts to close this waterway. And simultaneously, with a surge in energy prices after the attack on energy facilities in the region, the United States is considering reducing restrictions on Iranian oil. Broadcasting live from the Iran International Studio, this is 24 with Fardad Farahzad. Viewers of Iran International in Iran and around the world, hello and good evening. An hour ago, the U.S. president, regarding lifting oil sanctions on Iran and sending more troops for operations against the Islamic Republic, said the United States will do whatever is necessary. Donald Trump, in a meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister, said a lot of military forces in Iran are separating and falling apart. According to Trump, he told Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, not to attack energy infrastructures in Iran and emphasized that Netanyahu agrees with this too. Trump, in another part of his remarks, said that he hasn't made a decision yet to send troops to Iran.
No, I'm not putting troops anywhere.
No, we're not sending troops anywhere right now. And frankly, even if I wanted to do that, I certainly wouldn't tell you ahead of time. We're not doing that. We're simply doing whatever is necessary to keep things secure. Iran is a serious threat to the Middle East and the entire world, and everyone agrees with me on that. I think practically all civilized countries agree with me. So I really wanted to put out that fire quickly to end that whole issue. And oil, it might go up a little bit and the economy might go down slightly for a moment. But I honestly thought things would get much worse. I thought it would happen much worse than this. And initially, we really thought it would end quickly. We completely destroyed their navy. Absolutely everything that was stationed there, we destroyed. That includes taking out the leadership, the navy, the air force, and all anti-aircraft weapons are gone. Now, nobody even shoots at us at all.
Meanwhile, Britain, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, and Japan, in a joint statement condemning the Islamic Republic's attacks on commercial vessels in the Persian Gulf, announced their readiness to guarantee the safe passage of these ships through the Strait of Hormuz. In this statement, it was emphasized, referring to the fact that coordination with producing countries to increase oil sales has been put on the agenda, that freedom of navigation is one of the fundamental principles of international law and is emphasized by the United Nations and the Convention on the Law of the Sea. My colleagues Samira Garai from the White House and Niloufer Ebrahim from Paris join us. Samira, I'll start with you. In his meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister, Mr. Trump discussed Iran's war situation.
He said important things. His guest was an important person, too. Japan, as one of the countries that gets a large portion of its oil, 90% of the oil it needs, from that region and from the Strait of Hormuz. And in recent days, Mr. Trump really insisted that Japan also join a coalition to, open it up, make it safe, help out there. Japan, at first, also said they would send a warship. They would think about it. And overall, in the past 48 hours, Mr. Trump came and said, we don't want this at all. But before this meeting took place, a meeting that, was also very much discussed in the media, about Japan, which hasn't come forward and isn't going to help, what would its prime minister have to say to Mr. Trump? And Mr. Trump would definitely, say some harsh words to him in this meeting. But an hour before the meeting took place, a statement came out. We know Japan will, join the European countries in a coalition, and from this perspective, this meeting turned into a favorable one. Mr. Trump said he has a very close relationship with the Japanese Prime Minister. He, congratulated her again on her victory. And regarding Iran, naturally, all the questions, there were 1 or 2 questions about the Federal Reserve and stuff, but the main bulk of the questions were about the Iran issue. They talked about hard. They talked about military forces. The $200 billion budget for the Ministry of War, which a few hours ago was talked about in the Wall Street Journal, citing informed sources. Mr. Hacks himself was asked about it. Today, at the White House, Mr. Trump also talked about this. Regarding the budget, let me just say at the outset that Mr. Trump, while the figure is a high figure according to American media, Mr. Trump said this isn't just focused on the Iran issue. Although it's been said in the media that this budget was requested to strengthen the war with the Islamic Republic, Mr. Trump said the overall military situation in the world is a fragile one, and our military forces, right now, they need this kind of money. Mr. Trump, in another discussion, talked about the disintegration of military forces. Overall, he talked about striking the political structure, the leadership, and they said that politically, people are leaving the political body. And then Mr. Trump also talked about the military body and said it's not surprising their military personnel are leaving their posts. They've been severely attacked and weakened. Regarding Karg, a place where there's been a lot of discussion in the past 24 hours, will they capture it? That 31st Marine unit that's coming from Japan, will they enter the territory or won't they? Let's go hear some parts where he talked about the territory.
We can take out the island if anytime.
We can take the island if we want to do that. And, well, there's no protection there. We destroyed everything except the pipelines. Because if we want to rebuild the pipelines again, or if they want to build them, it'll take several years. But we are very, very significantly ahead of schedule. And I call this a tour. This was a little tour. Militarily, at military levels, there was also a very, very significant drop. I don't blame them.
Regarding Karg tomorrow, the ongoing discussion is highly relevant from an economic perspective, as the island is the ultimate bottleneck for the Islamic Republic's energy exports. It exports roughly 90% of its oil from there. From this strategic perspective, the United States can put intense financial pressure on the Islamic Republic. Additionally, from Karg or other surrounding small islands, the United States can successfully establish security in the Strait of Hormuz and effectively weaken the military activities that the Islamic Republic is using from the south to carry out disruptive operations in the Strait of Hormuz. Besides this, the discussion of Karg is important as anyway a land that now has military infrastructure, but also energy infrastructure and as an important export port. Besides this, there is also the South Pars discussion. Mr. Trump has threatened that if the Islamic Republic wants to continue its attacks on Qatar, the Islamic Republic did carry out one attack on Qatar, which caused the Turkish foreign minister to go to Qatar and have some sharp talks with his Qatari counterpart. The Qataris say it'll take 3 to 5 years if they want to repair them. It had all these reactions. Mr. Trump said, if you hit Qatar one more time, I will hit all of South Pars. Right now, we're talking about energy infrastructures in this way. It's possible that tensions might increase in this regard, or not. The start of this coalition might cause tensions to calm down there, and the Islamic Republic to stop its destructive activities in the Strait of Hormuz, bringing a bit of stability back to the oil market. This stability in the oil market is very important for the United States right now. Mr. Basin says they're thinking about lifting sanctions on nearly 140 million barrels of the Islamic Republic's oil that's currently on the surface of the water, not oil that hasn't entered tankers yet. So it can come into the market can calm down a bit, and prices can come down.
And in this regard, too, just within these past few minutes, we've seen that the Canadians are joining the initiative. The Prime Minister of Canada has officially announced that they will accompany and actively cooperate with efforts to secure and open the Strait of Hormuz. I know that in Europe, too, Nilufar, European countries are shifting their position. Despite the initial objections they had, it seems they are now cooperating with America, adopting much softer diplomatic language regarding joint efforts to keep the strategically vital Strait of Hormuz open.
Fardad, there are still a series of questions and what-ifs in this regard. Even though, they issue statements, even though they say they have the preparations, the readiness for the necessary effort, they have the necessary actions to do such a thing, but they, set conditions for it. Even after, the release of this very statement by the leaders, we see that France's foreign ministry is still emphasizing that France will not participate in any military operation to liberate or even reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And we're hearing, a remarkably similar stance emerging from France and Germany too. So, the broader consensus is that European countries still firmly believe they are not directly involved in this war. They maintain that they are not one of the direct parties to this ongoing conflict. So they absolutely do not want to, inadvertently fuel the further escalation of regional tensions. And if they say they are willing to help ensure vital maritime security, their talk is really focused on a future timeline, like a time when the armed conflicts had actually ended completely. That is precisely when they will finally get involved. They will offer their help and do whatever they can to make sure this critical maritime security is effectively provided at that time. And not, at a time when the conflicts are actually ongoing. The Islamic Republic is attacking regional countries, and the United States and Israel are targeting Iran. So in their minds, there's at least like a time frame. But it seems, in order to be able to stand alongside the United States at this time, to stand alongside European countries, they're saying they're ready to act when necessary. When the French Foreign Ministry talks about France's position, for example, on this, it says, "We've started talks right now, we're talking." But as Emmanuel Macron also points out, they believe that the Islamic Republic and, the US should enter direct negotiations on this matter and resolve it. Even though Macron, for example, talks with the Iranian president, the French foreign minister is in talks with the Islamic Republic's foreign minister. And on the other hand, they say they're in contact with even insurance companies or companies that actually need to transport this oil to see what they can do in this regard in the future. But their point is that in the current situation, even though it's vital for them, even though it's very important for them that this traffic takes place and ships can pass easily, because it has affected the European oil and gas market, but it doesn't seem, at this stage. They want to enter a military operation to liberate the Strait of Hormuz.
Niloufer Ebrahim in Paris and Samira Karaye at the White House. Thanks. While 20 days have passed since the start of the joint operation by the United States and Israel, the U.S. Secretary of War, in a press conference referring to the killing of IRGC and Basij commanders, said that commanding these two institutions in Iran is like the least sought-after job in the world. Peake said the U.S. has so far attacked more than 7,000 military targets in Iran and, reduced the Islamic Republic's missile capability by up to 90%. According to Hecht, the United States will carry out its biggest attack today and tonight.
امروز هم بزرگترین بسته حمله رو خواهیم داشت، مثل دیروز هم داشتیم. از روز اول گفتم توانمندی ما دائما داره افزایش پیدا میکنه و مال ایران کاهش پیدا میکنه. ما حمله میکنیم و از بالا تخریب و نابودی رو به اونها اعمال میکنیم و نیروهای ایران از بین رفته. صنایع دفاعی مثل کارخانه ها که اینها تغذیه میکنن پهپاد و موشک رو، اینها همه فلج شدن و نابود شدن و صدها هدف از صنایع رو به طور مستقیم حمله کردیم. اونها داریم اون جایی که موشک‌های بالستیک تولید میکردن بدتر از بقیه آسیب دیده.
Following the U.S. Secretary of War's remarks in the past few minutes, reports are coming from Tehran that air defenses in eastern and southern Tehran have been, highly activated. Our attention is naturally also on the U.S. capital, Iran's capital. U.S. Central Command said an American F-35 fighter jet made an emergency landing at a U.S. airbase in the Middle East after being hit by a shot, which was, likely from Iran. A CENTCOM spokesperson said this fifth-generation fighter jet was on a combat mission over Iran when it was, forced to make an emergency landing. He emphasized that the aircraft landed safely and the pilot is in stable condition, and this incident is, under investigation. According to a CNN report, this is the first time during the recent conflicts that an American aircraft has, likely been targeted by Iran. Omid Memarian, a political analyst at the Dawn Institute from Detroit, and Ferzin Nadimi, a senior research fellow for defense and security affairs at the Washington Institute from the same city, are with us. Mr. Nadimi, if these reports are true that Iran really targeted it, how significant is it, especially considering the complexities and new technologies in F-35 fighter jets?
Yes, of course. This makes perfect sense within the broader context of a very extensive air combat campaign, where more than 7,000 strategic targets are said to have been successfully hit. Thousands of complex combat missions have been carried out over Iranian territory. In my opinion, a single occupied aircraft being targeted amidst this massive scale is not very strange, and, it is certainly not a very big military achievement. But on the other hand, it remains deeply important because we are now entering a definitive phase of modern air warfare, where, as they consistently say, the US and Israeli air forces have established total total air superiority over Iran. And according to the recent military assessment provided by General Keane, air attacks have, fundamentally shifted in strategy, transitioning from traditional standoff attacks to highly precise close-in attacks, meaning these sophisticated aircraft, instead of solely relying on long-range cruise missiles and bombs to strike targets from a completely safe distance, are now deliberately flying much closer to the objective. Once in range, they deploy highly accurate guided munitions, utilizing advanced GPS or sophisticated laser guidance methods. Naturally, this vital tactical adjustment requires the planes to be significantly closer to the target, meaning the planes are flying deep into heavily defended Iranian territory. In fact, small tactical fighter jets alongside heavy strategic bombers have factually been flying deep into Iranian airspace for quite a while now. And not only are they successfully releasing advanced standoff missiles from a much farther distance, but they've also carried out sustained heavy bombardments. These strikes have been concentrated especially in the western and southern areas, targeting critical missile bases and strategic facilities related to the IRGC Navy. Consequently, this military work requires that there still be absolute air control and complete dominance over Iran's airspace. Furthermore, it demands strict control over Iran not actively using its air defense systems. This crucial suppression ensures that the operational security and safety of fighter jets, and especially strategic bombers, which are larger in size and vulnerable, can be completely achieved. Now, regarding the recent attack on an F-35 fighter jet, it seems it was targeted with a surface-to-air defense missile. The exact type of missile and the specific tactical nature of the engagement aren't completely clear at this moment. However, Iran has released a video showing infrared camera footage of an F-35 in flight, where a projectile approaches it at high speed and damages the aircraft. Despite the impact, it is quite clear the plane successfully continued its course and, according to a recent CENTCOM report, safely landed in a regional country. Analysts suggest the type of missile used could probably be one of those missiles guided by an advanced optical system, not by traditional radar. I say not radar because when an air defense system, whether its method of finding a target and guiding the missile to the target, and ultimately guiding the missile itself towards the target, if it's done with radar, it's very quickly detected by sensitive electronic receiver systems on fighter. But if the defense system is entirely passive and inactive, meaning that instead of utilizing a traditional active radar, it relies purely on optical infrared cameras or passive sensors that only pick up electronic emissions originating from the incoming target. By doing this, it can passively lock on to the threat without revealing its own position. Furthermore, it then fires a highly accurate missile that, instead of housing a standard emitting radar in its nose, relies on an advanced TV camera that autonomously guides itself directly to its target. This tactical possibility certainly exists within the current military landscape. The IRGC and the Army's Air Defense Force actively possess a specialized system known as Joshan. Furthermore, the IRGC has another advanced system called RAD-2 that can potentially execute this type of interception, assuming these units are fully operational in the field. Another plausible alternative involves the 358 and 359 cruise missiles. Yemeni forces previously utilized these exact weapons quite effectively during the Yemen War to reliably shoot down surveillance drones. Notably, in one documented instance, it appears they also successfully damaged a Saudi F-15 fighter jet using this same method. These munitions boast an operational range of about 100 to 150 kilometers and can reach their designated target at a speed of 700 to 1,000 kilometers per hour. Again, they have optical guidance, and it's less likely because their speed is lower compared to that F-35 jet. But it can't be completely ruled out. When the number of missions increases and you're very comfortable with that airspace, pilots might sometimes get a bit careless too.
During your remarks, Mr. Nadimi, we were watching live footage. Maybe my colleagues can get it again from Benjamin Netanyahu's press conference, which he's giving right now in Tel Aviv as we speak. In the past few minutes, the Israeli Prime Minister has said that the goal of this current war with the Islamic Republic has three main objectives. One of them is Iran's nuclear program to be completely destroyed. The second is the missile program. And the third is to create conditions for the people of Iran to be able to take control of their government. Let's get back to our main discussion. Mr. Memorian, we constantly hear from the Americans that Iran's missile and drone capabilities have significantly decreased. There's talk of over a 90% reduction in their capabilities. But at the same time, we see that on the ground, the Strait of Hormuz still doesn't have favorable conditions for the passage of international ships. The United States has, to some extent, appealed to its European and Asian allies for help in opening this strait. And even as we discussed with Mr. Nadimi, we see that while it's true, it's not comparable to the blows the Islamic Republic is taking. Tehran still seems to have destructive capability.
Exactly so. And this is a discussion that anyway takes up a lot of oxygen in Washington regarding the fact that Mr. Trump started this war a few weeks ago. And from the beginning, the plan was for a very decisive blow to be struck and for the Islamic Republic's government to either collapse or fall apart, for people to come out into the streets, or anyway, for it to be in a situation where Mr. Trump could declare victory. Anyway, the strongest army in the world is now in the region with the highest level of readiness and military forces. Israel's military equipment is alongside it on the other side. Two of the world's very large, well-equipped armies are there. And, for example, it's still causing problems with the Strait of Hormuz tactic, or it can still target U.S. interests in the region through drones. Thousands of points, more than 7,000 points, are said to have been hit. Many political and military leaders have been killed. But still, from Washington's perspective, it remains entirely unclear exactly where the war's political path will lead, meaning when will these military objectives finally end? What is the definitive point where one can say that Iran's nuclear program and Iran's missile program have either been destroyed to a very, very high percentage, or significantly set back their ability to rebuild for many years? And this is the point where we can, anyway, ultimately consider the ongoing war to be officially over. So militarily and politically, it seems there's no balance, and the Islamic Republic itself, well, it does have some capabilities regarding asymmetric warfare, and it's true that it has lost its air power, lost its ships, lost its missiles, but still, as you mentioned, and this is an issue that, well, has created doubt, has created hesitation regarding European countries and their joining this war in the region. And over the past few days, despite Mr. Trump very clearly asking them to come help escort tankers when passing through the Strait of Hormuz, we see that European countries have been very cautious for various reasons. Because anyway, over the past few days, we've seen that European countries absolutely don't want to be recognized later as violators of international law regarding why this war should be fought, whether this war has a legal aspect, meaning is it a legal war or not. They have a problem with this issue, especially since the discussion is also raised that the war is a war of choice by Mr. Trump, so it's a very important option that Europeans are paying attention to. And from joining in war, I mean they've refrained, and it's possible that now they might join in the Strait of Hormuz, given the discussion that Mr. Trump has brought up. But it's clear that they have reservations, and the other issue is that the war's objective isn't clear to them. Just as this discussion is being raised in Washington, it's also being raised in European capitals too, what the goal of the war is. It seems that for America, Iran's nuclear program, Iran's missile program are the main goals. But for Israel, there are other goals too, like regime change, or, weakening Iran to the extent that neither the current regime nor any government that comes after the Islamic Republic can ever be a threat to Israel. Overall, we're in a situation where these military attacks that America and Israel are carrying out have reached a point where people want to know exactly what the plan is and what the endpoint is. And how is this attack plan supposed to be wrapped up? Because at least we know that so far, Washington hasn't proposed a proper path.
This endpoint that Mr. Memarian referred to, Mr. Nadimi, is an incredibly important point. Many observers are still eager to know what America and Israel's final strategic plan is, after all, and whether their plan is fundamentally shared across all areas, or if they necessarily have distinctly different objectives in this ongoing war. Right now, as we are hearing Mr. Netanyahu's words once again, he is boldly promising his people that he will completely change the geopolitical face of the Middle East. I'll repeat again, he's also given 3 promises. He specified 3 goals. He said the nuclear program, the missile program, and preparing the conditions for regime change in Iran. Is there any sign that these goals have the same reflection in Washington too? And is it clear what the end point of this war will be, according to Americans and Israelis?
It seems there are notable differences between Washington and Jerusalem regarding the ultimate endpoint and the necessary conditions for ending the current war, or at least temporarily stopping it. As you mentioned, within Israel, the complex issue of preparing the right conditions for people to actively take their destiny into their own hands remains one of the most critical conditions. But in the United States, it doesn't seem like this specific objective is a primary focus. Even if a quiet diplomatic effort is made in that direction, this issue isn't officially on the table. Now, perhaps this stark divergence in priorities is largely because of the vastly different domestic political situations currently unfolding in Washington and Israel. But what Mr. Peter also specifically emphasized today during the Pentagon briefing is that Israel's overriding strategic priority remains focused on definitively eliminating Iran's capability to produce nuclear weapons. Furthermore, he highlighted the crucial goal of neutralizing Iran's naval force. By this, I believe he means systematically dismantling Iran's ability to close the strategically vital Strait of Hormuz and threaten the region's critical international waterways. Additionally, neutralizing Iran's ballistic missile capability remains paramount. He expressed confidence that America is progressing well in this aligned strategic direction. As time goes on, the United States is actively increasing its number of tactical air flights and joint military operations. Notably, he didn't specify any timeline for these efforts, firmly stating that this security work will continue as long as necessary.
Thank you to both of you, gentlemen, Omid Mamarian, political analyst at the Dawn Institute from Detroit, and Frazeen Nadimi, senior research fellow for defense and security affairs at the Washington Institute from the same city. With us, as I told you earlier, right at this moment as we're speaking, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, is speaking to the people of this country in a press conference. First, his speech was in Hebrew. Now he's speaking in English. In the past few minutes, perhaps the most important key point that the Israeli Prime Minister referred to are the three main goals he has specified for the war with Iran. He said that the main goal is completely destroying Iran's nuclear program, destroying this country's missile program, and also providing the conditions for regime change in Iran by the people of this country. Mr. Netanyahu said in the past few minutes that the nation of Israel is a nation like a lion, and he promised that families who were harmed during the Islamic Republic's missile attacks on Israeli territory will be compensated by the government so that conditions become more favorable for them. Mr. Netanyahu is referring to the Islamic Republic's attacks on what he called civilian targets, and also United States assets in the region, including in Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and the Emirates. He stated that the Islamic Republic is actively attempting to carry out campaigns of sabotage through its network of proxy groups in Europe. Furthermore, he emphasized that the regime has effectively taken the international community hostage by systematically using calculated threats. Regarding the highly strategic Strait of Hormuz, a critical bottleneck for global energy, the Israeli Prime Minister confirmed that Israel is assisting its American counterparts by sharing vital intelligence. This cooperation aims to provide the secure conditions necessary for keeping the Strait of Hormuz open to international maritime trade. This complex geopolitical maneuvering is happening while, as I mentioned to you at the beginning of the program, the U.S. president is now enjoying relative diplomatic support from a number of his Western allies, including key partners in Europe, Japan, and also Canada. Of course, the exact extent and specific nature of the plan remain unclear regarding the opening of these crucially important global energy waterways. Right now, you are seeing the live remarks made by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Tel Aviv. As soon as he shares other important points, especially concerning the ongoing war situation and Iran, we will definitely keep you updated and fully informed.
An hour ago in the U.S. Congress, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard reported that Mojtaba Khamenei was severely wounded in an Israeli attack. Speaking at the House Intelligence Committee's Worldwide Threats Assessment hearing, she explained that due to the new Iranian leader's injuries, Iran's highest-level decision-making situation remains unclear. Meanwhile, John Ratcliffe, the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, said at this hearing that Iran has been a constant threat to the U.S. for many years, and groups funded by the Iranian regime are continuously attacking U.S. interests in the Middle East.
As you mentioned, and in my opinion, it's completely documented, Iran has always been a persistent and continuous threat over the past 47 years. Hundreds, if not thousands, of Americans have been killed as a result of Iran's activities, especially by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and certainly thousands more have been injured and disabled. But most importantly, there has never been a reduction or cessation in threats against American interests and forces in the region, not only from Iran itself, itself, but also from its proxy forces. Iraqi militia groups like Kataib Hezbollah, Lebanese Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and other groups affiliated with the Iranian regime, all of whom are funded by this regime and continuously and consistently attack U.S. interests and forces.
Committing assaults and attacks on American interests persistently.
Our correspondent, Marzia Husseini, is with us from the U.S. Congress. Marzia, this session has also provided another opportunity for lawmakers to put more pressure on the administration and ask more questions about the state of the war and its objectives.
This was the second day of these hearings. Yesterday, it was held in the Senate, and today in the House of Representatives. The FBI director, the CIA director, and the director of national intelligence were all three present. The session was much more challenging than yesterday's because the House members had carefully reviewed yesterday's session. They challenged these three today on all the gaps they had tried not to fill. The summary of the session was that all three of these individuals very consistently tried to pin all the responsibilities for this war on Mr. Trump, saying we only provided information to Mr. Trump. It's up to the president to decide how serious the threat is, whether an attack should happen or not. But Ms. Gabbard brought up two important points in these sessions. Specifically, in today's sessions, first, she said that based on U.S. government intelligence, meaning the combined intelligence of the CIA and Israeli intelligence, we know that Mojtaba Khamenei has been injured, and now the issue of decision-making at the highest levels of the Islamic Republic is very challenging. The second point she mentioned was regarding the fact that the targets Israel and the U.S. are striking inside Iran are different from each other. She emphasized that our focus is on the missile program, the nuclear program, and the Navy, but Israel's priority in attacks on Iran is targeting the leaders of the Islamic Republic. We know that they had made relatively similar statements yesterday as well, but one point that's important again here in the U.S. Congress is that another vote was held to stop this war right now, and again, this resolution failed. Based on the latest figures I received, 53 people in the Senate voted against it, which means only 47 people voted in favor. Senator Fetterman, a Democrat, voted against his own party, and Republican Senator Rand Paul also voted against his own party so far, even though they said this bill and this resolution are going to be put to a vote again. Initially, I also spoke with 4 senators yesterday and today from the Republican Party, and one thing I realized is that despite their concerns, Republicans have given Trump a completely free hand and are strongly supporting Trump. Let's go watch one of these interviews and come back.
The president is doing the right thing by taking a firm stance. We must make absolutely sure the Iranian government doesn't acquire a nuclear weapon. That is our first priority. Second, they shouldn't possess advanced ballistic missiles, whose explicit goal is to destroy Americans. Furthermore, the Iranian regime is truly terrible, especially for the people of Iran who suffer under its oppressive rule. Just think about how many innocent citizens they've ruthlessly killed this year alone. Ultimately, what we deeply hope will happen is that a new, responsible leadership will come into power there that actually cares about its own citizens. A leadership that wants its people to have the same opportunities we have in America to build their lives, start businesses, and, of course, no longer create all this chaos, death, and destruction in the Middle East. Regarding what will happen after this, I think the United States will continue to destroy Iran's military capabilities. What we hope is that the people of Iran can rise up themselves and change the regime. The Ayatollah has treated them unfairly. You don't want to see anyone die, but the death of the Ayatollah or other Iranian leaders is good for everyone else.
And the last important news today here in Congress is that, based on reports, although the White House hasn't confirmed it yet, the Pentagon is going to request $200 billion in military funding to continue attacks on Iran. This figure is much higher than the initial amount that was imagined. This amount was supposed to be $50 billion. And now, actually, the sheer size of this number has, in fact, created a wave of reactions here in the U.S. Congress. Right at the beginning, and even before this plan has entered Congress, Democrats are strongly opposing it. 2 of them were just here. I spoke with them. And one of them told me, he said, if they want us to land with them, they should have taken us with them during takeoff too. Consequently, if they made the decision for war alone, they should also solve the budget issue and its problems themselves. There's a lot of opposition like this because, just compare this requested amount of $200 billion with the fact that over the past 4 years, the U.S. Congress has allocated roughly $188 billion for Ukraine. And now, in the 3rd week of the war, they're asking Congress
Congress for such a huge sum? This is an issue that will probably be one of the challenges facing Mr. Trump's cabinet here in Congress in the coming days and weeks.
Thank you, my colleague Marzieh Husseini at the U.S. Congress. As we speak, the Israeli Prime Minister is also continuing his press conference in Tel Aviv. Moments ago, a reporter from Newsmax asked him about the future of the government in Iran, and he said that, according to him, we don't want to replace Hitler with Himmler, and that we must create conditions for the Iranian people to be able to take control of their own destiny. Also, in the past few minutes during our program, the Israeli Prime Minister said there's a fake news story circulating in the media these days, as if it was Israel that dragged the United States into this war. He said he's in contact with the U.S. president, and that's not the case. Mr. Trump himself clearly knew and knows about the threats from the Islamic Republic, including the fact that Americans have been threatened and attacked by the Islamic Republic since the very inception of this regime. He referred to the hostage crisis at the U.S. Embassy, where American diplomats were held hostage in Tehran for 444 days. He also went on to mention the large number of American casualties, which he described as thousands, in Iraq carried out by the Islamic Republic, and said that now, during this war, the Islamic Republic is extorting for oil. He said, imagine, according to him, what dangers these madmen could pose to the world if they had nuclear weapons. The Israeli Prime Minister continued his remarks by saying that world leaders are privately supporting this war, and all of them are familiar with and aware of the threat posed by the Islamic Republic.
Khamenei, still alive, would have ordered the beginnings of the new
U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent stated that Washington is considering easing restrictions on Iranian oil to help stabilize global energy markets. He explained that sanctions on oil on water stored in tankers might be lifted in the coming days, bringing approximately 140 million barrels into the market. Bessent told Fox Business that some Iranian tankers had previously passed through the Strait of Hormuz with U.S. awareness. These statements come as prices have surged following recent attacks on Middle East energy infrastructure, with Brent crude surpassing $115. My colleague Mohammed Mashinchin has joined us from our other studio in Washington. Mohammed, since this news broke, there have been many ambiguities. What does lifting Iran's oil sanctions actually mean? Will this money then go into the Islamic Republic government's treasury? How will that work? If it's really like this, that on one hand, America fights with Tehran, and on the other hand, it lifts its oil sanctions.
The fundamental first point is that the only factor that can genuinely force America, and specifically President Donald Trump, to back down and end the escalating war with the Islamic Republic is unbearable pressure on global markets and the broader world economy. The most crucial measure of this economic vulnerability is practically reflected in skyrocketing global oil prices. America knows this strategic reality very well. President Trump's economic team, especially a seasoned strategist like Scott Bessent, is completely aware of this sensitive matter. In fact, long before that epic attack operation even began, they had extensively considered this exact vulnerability, mapping out various probable scenarios to mitigate fallout. You could even argue that the strategic prelude of taking down Nicolas Maduro and securing Venezuela was heavily calculated to stabilize oil supplies for this crisis. At least had Iran in mind. From the start of the war until today, we've heard this. The news that Kepler published, it said that over 2 million barrels per day are being exported by Iran, meaning Iranian tankers are being loaded and leaving the Strait of Hormuz. This was, of course, before the Strait of Hormuz was closed, but reports indicated that this continued even during the closure. This means that the United States, even then, had aircraft, had military equipment. They could have stopped Iranian tankers, but they didn't. This whole issue is about this supply pressure. When the Strait of Hormuz is closed, others can't export their oil, and this creates supply pressure, which shows itself in oil prices. And that's why I think they allowed it, before, of course, lifting Iran's sanctions. The initial step was to quickly prioritize lifting the remaining economic sanctions on Venezuela. The critical second step was to lift sanctions on Russian oil on water, which is currently also sanctioned. And now we've inevitably reached discussions regarding Iran. Now we can clearly see that the Americans and their international partners are trying various remedies. These range from tapping into strategic reserves to, as you accurately said, lifting Russian oil sanctions, at least for now, for a period of 1 month. month. Now there's talk of lifting Iran's oil sanctions. These Persian Gulf countries themselves have other corridors in the Red Sea. Some of them have resources, they have storage facilities in Southeast Asia, and all of this is helping anyway. But despite all this help, we now see that Brent crude is above $115. Since last night, a few more dollars have been added to it again. How much do you think the economic discussion, which the Islamic Republic seems to have really put its hand on, right on that choke point of the Strait of Hormuz, can change the fate of this war in some direction? Ultimately, I'm saying the only thing that can change this in favor of the Republic is justice. And the Republic's analysis has been correct from day one. Their behavior was unethical. It was an attack on urban, residential, and civilian infrastructure, on oil infrastructure. But anyway, all these actions were aimed at creating insecurity with the goal of, and well, after that, the Strait of Hormuz. So at all analyses, which, well, is usually pessimistic, conservative, especially in wartime conditions. They expected oil prices to reach $150 within those first few days, within the first week. Almost all economic media outlets worldwide covered this and speculated about it, and all the analysts of the Islamic Republic were constantly repeating this $150 figure. After that, it trended, again, in Iranian media, about $200 oil, and how anyway America and the world would have to get used to this $200 oil. But this readiness of the Trump cabinet for this, because after all, this was the most probable scenario, you know? I mean, the oil price was the only thing that could have an impact. It caused them to succeed in bringing the price down very quickly, meaning on the first day, the price reached $119. As soon as the market opened, the market in America opened, the price subsided. It came down to below $110, and then it reached below $100. Again, let's not forget, it's been over 20 days since the war started. During these 20 days of war, the price of oil and Brent crude still hasn't reached $120. This itself is nothing short of a miracle. This itself shows that a very precise operation with very brief predictions, the team was completely ready to control the price of oil. And it's been successful so far. I think the fact that the oil price now, after 20 days since the war started and the Strait of Hormuz being closed for a relatively long time, which in all predictions was the worst possible scenario, still hasn't reached $120. So I think this is still within a completely tolerable margin for America and the global economy.
The U.S. president had said that the Israelis apparently attacked these Salfar's facilities without coordination. Right now, as we speak, an I-24 reporter asked the Israeli prime minister if that was the case, and he said yes, Israel did it alone. But the U.S. president has asked Israel not to attack these targets anymore. How reckless do you think that was? And does it carry the risk of escalating the war in this very tense market, especially in the energy sector, and making things difficult for America and its allies?
Honestly, well, we don't know. First off, we really don't know what happened and what discussions took place behind the scenes. But I can tell you my guess. My guess is that something of this scale can't be without coordination. This is an issue I've repeatedly mentioned in previous interviews, even a year or two ago. Iran and its infrastructure are very vulnerable. Don't doubt that in all the scenarios presented to the Israeli Prime Minister and the US President, the first page has a 5-item shortlist that says 70% of their oil is here, 70% of their gas is here, 70% of their gasoline, their trade, and so on and so forth. These are also completely defenseless right now. And if these people of Iran, both inside and outside the country, hadn't succeeded, this would have been a big achievement for us to show the world, America, and Israel that the Iranian people are separate from the rest, from the government. I think those same scenarios that happened previously in Iraq might have repeated here too, but we see that despite 20 days, these infrastructures are still undamaged. My conclusion is that this was a warning shot, and perhaps the last warning shot, to show that we can inflict damage, and it was practically a way of controlling the Islamic Republic by reminding them of the dangers that could await them if they want to continue on their current path.
Thank you, Mohammed Mashinchian, my colleague from our other studio in Washington. Let's go back to Tel Aviv in these final minutes, actually seconds of the program. The Israeli Prime Minister is still speaking, and in recent moments, he said, if you think global markets are volatile now, imagine what the situation would be like if Iran had obtained nuclear weapons, and he predicted that the war would end much faster than expected. Thank you for watching 24 tonight. You can watch the program again later on YouTube.